Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus, today joined by Mehrob here. We have a lot to get into. If you're just tuning in, we just finished going over previewing the NBA Finals. We both had the Thunder. Curious who you guys have in a pivotal Game 5, but more big basketball news broke over the weekend. Desmond Bane, the number 2 option over there with the Memphis Grizzlies, was traded to the Orlando Magic for 4 unprotected first-round picks, a 2029 pick swap, KCP, and Cole Anthony. A little bit of a steep price over there, but worth it if it can push the Magic into that next echelon of competition. Maybe they can find their way out of their East. We'll break that down in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with us here on a beautiful June 16th, Monday. What a day it is. Anyway, we've got a lot to get into here. Desmond Bane, the big move. I'm shocked a trade got announced before the NBA Finals are over. This is something that was kind of rumored with Kevin Durant. They had some stuff in the works here. Obviously, that's coming out to be more and more like a lie at this point. But the Magic are the first ones to strike on what is expected to be a crazy summer in the NBA. Desmond Bane, the first one to go. He goes for 4 unprotected first. That's the big one. KCP, a big contract that they might want to get off of there, but maybe he can still turn it around. Cole Anthony, and of course, that pick swap here. Before we get into the ramifications of all of this, Mehrob, just talk to me about this trade a little bit. Who wins right now? Because this is a wild way to kick off trade season in the NBA.
Definitely. If the NBA has a crazy dinner plan summer set up for us in free agency, they had to give us a major appetizer here. And this is what this was with the Desmond Bane trade. This is a number 2 option that I personally thought was going to be untouchable in Memphis. I was looking at the other 2 stars possibly being tradable, being major trade assets for this new Grizzlies coaching regime that's over there. They bring in the new coach this year, firing Taylor Jenkins mid-season. I always thought Desmond Bane was one of those guys that they were not going to get rid of. They were going to continue to build another strong unit with him as a supporting cast, as a great, reliable two-way player that Desmond Bane is. But it just shows what it took to get off of him. 4 first-round picks, Cole Anthony, KCP headed to Memphis. For Memphis, I love this move. It sets them up beautifully for the future. They have so many assets, not only tradable assets, but they have so much draft capital that they can use to bring in a new young core over there. So I love the move for the Grizzlies. But for the Magic side of things, while I do think they gave up a little too much, this now gives another star player for Paolo Banchero to work with, another shooter, another offensive threat that the Magic have desperately needed on this team. It was glaring for the last 2 seasons, bringing the Cavs to 7 games 2 years ago, bringing the Celtics to 6 games this year. Both times, every time this team was in close games, it just felt like they were one offensive piece away from winning both of those series. So I love this move. It takes pressure off of Franz Wagner to be a normal center, be a number 3 option. Takes pressure off of Paolo Banchero defensively in terms of defensive pressure. As a whole, I like the move for both of these teams. And if this is just the first trade for a crazy NBA summer, we are in for a wild summer.
Yeah, you talk about especially the terms around Desmond Bane being traded, right? How you were shocked that he was the guy that was moved. To me, this feels like a move that the Magic, that the Grizzlies weren't shopping Desmond Bane around, right? This is more the Magic come to the Grizzlies with an offer they can't refuse. This is an overpay, but it's an overpay that was a necessity. You talk about that now, I guess, four-headed monster in Orlando of Bane, Bencaro, Wagner, and Suggs. Coming off the bench, you've got Jonathan Isaac, Anthony Black, and Mo Wagner as well. Like, this is a deep team. It's an expensive team, but it's a deep team. You talk about an Eastern Conference that feels wide open, but with moves like this and what we're expecting from the rest of the Eastern Conference, the competitors in the East, the Cavs probably going to stay put, but I expect the Knicks to make a big move. The Celtics are out of it here. The Pacers are probably not going to make a big move, but they just won the East, so they're going to be a big threat over there. This automatically puts the Magic, who I think if they were healthy this season would have been a top 4 seed in the East anyway, into that conversation here. I love this move for them. I think the more interesting side of this conversation, because we understand why they made this trade. If you're Orlando, you add a guy that shoots 42%. You space the floor a little bit, which was by far their biggest issue. You keep that elite defense, which has been kind of that calling card of this new era of Magic basketball with a really solid defensive core. You get shooting. You get off of that KCP contract, which wasn't really aging too well just 1 year in. I like what they had. I like what they did. Again, I would have preferred to not give up too much, but that's just what happens when you go and get a guy like Desmond Bane. The Grizzlies are the one that I'm super fascinated by because they could go so many different ways with this, right? They could trade Ja or Triple J, right? All of those guys, they could be gone. They fired their head coach. They were an 8 seed last year. They seemingly weren't too close to a title. They could move off of everybody and hit the reset button. But they also, with the assets from this Bane trade, maybe make a move for a superstar like a Giannis or a KD to play next to Ja and Triple J. And that's a deep team over there. You have now big contracts like KCP that you can trade to match salary in stuff like this. There's a lot of ways they can go. If you are the Grizzlies, are you selling everything and starting fresh, or are you just making one final push with this core and seeing what is out there in the trade market?
As much as I want to say they want to give it one more shot with Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr., these are two guys that I'm very fond of. I think they're two guys that are incredibly underrated in the Western Conference. I just think the front office, first of all, let's take Jaren Jackson Jr. out of the picture. I think front office is kind of a little bit of, I don't want to use the term annoyed, but just disappointed with Ja Morant and his production. The number 2 overall pick back in 2018, I believe, or 2017, back in the day. A guy that a lot of people had a lot of high hopes on coming out of Murray State. And if we're looking back on it, he hasn't made a Western Conference final. This team is consistently in the top 3 of the Western Conference. Just before they fired Taylor Jenkins, they were once again this year in the number 2 seed. And what have they done? They lose to Steph Curry in 2022. That's probably their best playoff highlight. They lose to the Lakers in 2023 in the first round. This is just a team that's consistently just fallen back, just hasn't lived up to the expectations, hasn't grown. It hasn't, at least, like, when you're talking about growing with young players, with a young core, playoff success is so important. And when you don't have that, it just stifles. At some point or another, it just puts pressure on the front office. And eventually that bubble explodes. With Desmond Bane, I'm right there with you. I don't think they wanted to get rid of Desmond Bane. But with Ja Morant, I think they are ready to shop Ja Morant. There've already been some rumors about that. I think they take this new young draft capital and they build a new young core there. I think it would just make sense for the new coach as well. Bring in a new coach, bring in a bunch of new guys, a new team, and then just build the team up, see what can happen with this new team.
Yeah, Ja Morant is a super interesting case too because he's a guy that undeniably, if you get him on the court, is an elite player. Right, with his athleticism over there, what he's able to do with the basketball, it is insane. His hops are just like nothing else I've ever seen. I feel like he could jump over the moon if you gave him enough runway, right? This is a guy that is just so much fun to watch, but he's also a guy that has had some injury histories. And when you're talking about a guy that's so explosive and athletic, that is especially scary when you're talking about Ja Morant. It's not just that though. It's the off the court issues as well that he can't seem to quite kick. He's having trouble staying on the court for both injuries and suspension reasons. So because of that, the market is a little bit muddled on Ja Morant. There's plenty of teams that I think would love to have a guy like Ja Morant, but I don't know how many contenders are really going to be lining up to get Ja, a guy that maybe doesn't fit the best in so many teams. He's a very much a ball dependent guy. He needs the ball in his hands. But he's a special athlete. What kind of fits? What kind of places does a Ja Morant fit into? Is it just these tanking teams? Because I think he'd be a fun watch on like the Wizards, for instance. But I don't think he wants to go play for the Wizards, right? I don't think he would have a lot of fun over there in DC. Where are some good fits for a guy like Ja Morant?
I think one that, I mean, just not giving this too much thought, the first team that comes to mind are the Phoenix Suns, especially what they get back in this deal. If this deal goes through, whoever they deal Kevin Durant to, they will get assets from, whether it's the Knicks, they get Karl Anthony Towns, whether it's the Timberwolves, they can get a bunch of assets there, a bunch of young pieces. Whatever they get back, they will still have a team. They still have Devin Booker. If you can add Ja Morant to that team, I think that would not only be another box office team to watch, it would be an interesting team to see how they could get how much success they could have, not only in the regular season but in the playoffs as well. That's just one team that comes to mind. You could talk about the Heat if you would like. There's not that many point guard heavy needing teams. That's the biggest thing that I'm noticing. There's a lot of great point guards in the NBA right now, and there's not that many teams that need a good point guard. So I think that's what waters down the search a lot for these teams. I think Phoenix is the number one option that I can think of off the top of my head.
I think Triple J. I think he's a guy that's a little bit more widely available, right? I think any team would be ecstatic to have a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr. over there. He is not only an elite defender, constantly in that depoy conversations, but he's a guy that is at a position of need. You talk about a wing that can play like a stretch four, can even slide down to the five if you really need a guy down there with his defensive acumen. It's a really interesting kind of prospect there. And you talk about some of these big names out there. You have a Giannis, you have a KD, and it doesn't make sense to trade away these guys if you are going to hold on, trade for those guys if you're going to trade away your other two stars. But it feels like Memphis is kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place right now, where they move off of these two guys. It's just going to be a disaster season, and sometimes you just have to be fine with that. They also have drafted really well. They have a really deep team. You talk about one of the best drafts last year, getting a lot of good value. Zach Edey stepped up. Sandy Aldama stepped up over there for them. This is a Grizzlies team that I think, they were good. They were a 2 seed for a long time. Then they fired their coach. A lot of things went wrong for that team. But Triple J is an asset that if I'm a contending team, I'm going to give up so much for that combination of defense and offense right there, and his just ability to play three positions on the floor is huge. How much do you think you could get for a guy like Triple J, and is it kind of just time for them to move on?
As much as this kind of hurts to say, JJJ just might be one of those guys that you can only get like a first and a second round pick for. He's not one of those guys that you can get you might be able to get a guy like a Cole Anthony, like a good, reliable bench piece, a solid player, a Mikal Bridges even. You can get a solid, good player, but you can't get one of the top 25, one of the greats of the NBA right now. That's just unfortunate. You can't, with JJJ alone, you can't do it. If you added a guy like a Jalen Wells, like a Zach Edey, there's a bunch of young talent on the Memphis Grizzlies. So there are some packages that you can use to go out there and get another great piece. It's just going to need to be a package. It would not be a single piece. It would not be JJJ by himself. If you just wanted to trade him, I think the best deal you could get would be a first and a second round pick, or a couple second round picks in return for him, unfortunately.
See, that's interesting to me because you see a guy like Desmond Bane go for 4 firsts. You see a guy like Mikal Bridges, who kind of is the guard version of Triple J, maybe. Maybe that's a little bit too far for me to go there. Go for 5 firsts. And you look at just the economy of picks in the NBA, with especially how limited every single team is this year other than the Nets in cap space. I think you could fetch a pretty high price for a guy like JJJ. And it would probably come with some kind of package because, I mean, you're not going to go out and get a lot of if you're trading him away, you're not trying to compete. You're not trading for a top 25 player, but I think you could probably get at least 2 first-round picks, maybe even 3, depending on how desperate of a trade partner you're able to find. You go and you look for a team that is desperate for defense to add some length to their team. I think you could absolutely get a good amount for Triple J there. But this Magic trade, I still think is big for them. So finding our way back to Orlando here, you talk about a team in the East that, with this trade, like we were saying earlier on, cements themselves as at least a top half of the Eastern Conference, right? A team that will be, knock on wood, everything stays healthy for them, a top 4 seed in the East next year, competing with the Pacers and the Knicks and the Cavs. How much of a title threat does adding Desmond Bane to that Orlando squad make them?
I think that's the perfect sweet spot that you put him right there at that 4 spot. That's exactly what I said when I was reacting with my other good friend and co-host here on the GSMC Sports Network, Jake Daley. That's exactly what we said. I'd put him right at 4 behind the Knicks, Cavs, and Pacers. You could probably muddle in the Celtics if you'd like, but not this year. It would be 2 years from now for certain. But when I'm looking at this Magic team, I think they're definitely in contention for the Eastern Conference. I think it's going to be an interesting Eastern Conference. It might not be as loaded as you think, but it's going to be very competitive. And there's a bunch of young teams in here that are going to be that are going to be shopping and going to be competing for some experience to represent the Eastern Conference. I think the Orlando Magic are right there with them. I think in terms of a team that I think they could knock off, I think they could easily knock off the Indiana Pacers based on their defense alone. The Pacers are big time about pace, space, playing with speed. I think a strong defense would really, really give them a hard time. As much as I think the Thunder have a great defense, they also play with a lot of speed, and they utilize SGA and that offense so much that their defense sometimes gets forgotten about. When you have a team like the Orlando Magic that their defense is the main focal point, I think that's a team that could give the Pacers a lot of trouble. But I think that's just my take on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. I was really high on the Magic this year. I thought they were going to finish as the 3 seed in the East, honestly. They end up being the 8. Again, a lot of that can be pointed to injuries on this squad. But you add Desmond Bane to that, I'm still incredibly high on them. I think they're a team that has a real chance to win the East. I think they match up really well with the Cavs. We saw them take care of business against the Cavs a whole lot in the regular season, breaking down a lot of their historic win streaks that they were on this season. The Magic were a thorn in their side for them. And honestly, I thought if they matched up with them in the first round, they might have been able to eliminate them. That's going back and changing history, though. I do like this trade for both sides. I think the Magic win in the short term, at least right now. Just looking at everything right now, the Magic are the winners in my eyes, but the Grizzlies have a lot of options. They can their next move is going to be the most crucial in deciding how this trade goes down in as far as legacy wise. I'm super curious how it's going to be because the Grizzlies, they are not done making moves this offseason. and I can't wait to see what's coming next for him. But we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we shift our attention over to the world of baseball. It's trade season, not just in the NBA, but also in the MLB. A Luka Doncic-esque trade took place yesterday between the Boston Red Sox and the San Francisco Giants. Getting my sports mixed up here. We'll talk about the Rafael Devers shocking move and trade coming up next here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.